The easiest badge to wear is the fake one. The hardest badge to earn is the one no one ever has to prove. Rain had a way of making every highway look the same. Streetlights blurred into long golden streaks across the wet asphalt, while passing headlights disappeared behind sheets of mist that rolled lazily over the empty road. It was the kind of night where every sound carried farther than expected. The hum of distant engines, the soft tapping of rain against steel guardrails, and the occasional crackle of a police radio somewhere in the darkness. Marcus Bennett drove steadily through the storm. His pickup truck showed nothing remarkable. It wasn't new, nor was it flashy. A weathered toolbox rested in the truck bed, and a folded reflective jacket lay on the passenger seat beside him. Anyone glancing through the rain-covered windshield would have seen nothing more than another man heading home after a long day. Marcus preferred it that way. He had spent years learning that the strongest professionals rarely needed to announce who they were. The dashboard clock read 10:43 p.m. He reached toward the radio, lowering the volume as the sound of tires cutting through shallow puddles filled the quiet cab. The night felt peaceful, almost ordinary. Then blue lights exploded across his rearview mirror. Marcus glanced upward. Once. Calmly. His speed had been well within the posted limit. His headlights were on. His seatbelt rested securely across his chest. Nothing about the stop surprised him. Traffic stops were part of life. He eased off the accelerator, activated his right turn signal, and guided the pickup smoothly onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched beneath the tires before the truck came to a complete stop. His engine remained running. His hands settled naturally on the steering wheel. The rain continued falling. In the mirror, a black SUV rolled to a stop several yards behind him. Marcus watched as a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark tactical jacket, duty belt, badge clipped near his chest. Everything about his appearance seemed intentionally designed to project authority. The man adjusted his jacket before walking toward the driver's window with long, deliberate strides. He never smiled. As he approached, Marcus noticed something unusual. Not enough to draw a conclusion, just enough to remember. The man's flashlight swept across the cabin before stopping on Marcus's face. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then the stranger's expression hardened. License. Registration. His voice carried the unmistakable confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Marcus reached slowly toward the center console. Certainly, every movement remained visible, measured, predictable. He retrieved his driver's license and registration without hesitation before placing both documents against the inside of the partially lowered window. The stranger barely glanced at them. Instead, his attention remained fixed on Marcus himself. You from around here? Yes. You own this truck? I do. The questions weren't unusual. The tone was. Marcus had participated in enough professional encounters throughout his career to recognize when someone was gathering information and when someone had already decided what they believed. The stranger leaned closer. You seem awfully relaxed. Marcus met his eyes without raising his voice. I've learned that staying calm usually helps everyone. The answer seemed to irritate him. His jaw tightened. You got anything illegal in this vehicle? No. We'll see. Without another word, the man stepped away from the window. Marcus watched him through the side mirror. Again, something felt slightly out of place. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just different. The jacket looked new. The equipment looked polished. Yet the way the man carried himself lacked the quiet discipline Marcus had come to associate with experienced officers. It felt rehearsed, as though someone had carefully studied authority without ever truly understanding it. Rain dripped steadily from the brim of the stranger's cap. He spoke briefly into what appeared to be a shoulder microphone. Marcus listened carefully. Nothing came back. No dispatcher. No acknowledgement. Only silence swallowed by the storm. A pair of headlights slowed as another vehicle passed the scene. The driver looked toward the flashing lights before continuing. Down the highway, from a distance, everything appeared completely normal. A routine traffic stop. A uniformed officer. A compliant driver. Exactly the picture the stranger seemed determined to create. The man returned to the driver's window. This stop may take longer than expected. Marcus nodded once. I understand. The stranger studied him for another long moment before speaking again. You know, he said quietly, people usually become nervous by now. Marcus answered with the same steady composure. That depends on who's standing beside the window. For the first time that night, The stranger's confidence flickered ever so slightly. It lasted less than a second, but Marcus noticed it. And somewhere beneath the sound of falling rain, the first invisible crack had begun to form in a badge that had never truly belonged to the man wearing it. Authority doesn't reveal itself through the loudest voice. It reveals itself through the smallest details that cannot be rehearsed. The stranger stood beside the driver's window, allowing the silence to linger just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Rainwater streamed from the brim of his cap, dripping onto the soaked pavement below. His flashlight remained fixed on Marcus Bennett's face, as though searching for the nervous reaction he clearly expected to find. It never came. Marcus sat exactly as before, both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. His breathing remained slow. His expression never changed. Years in law enforcement had taught him that people often revealed themselves when their expectations were challenged. The stranger broke the silence. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus looked at him calmly. "May I ask the reason?" "You don't ask the questions." His reply came too quickly, too sharply. Marcus noticed another small detail. Experienced officers usually explained enough to maintain control without escalating unnecessary tension. This man seemed more interested in displaying authority than exercising it. Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped into the rain. Cold droplets soaked his jacket within seconds. He kept his hands visible. No sudden movements. No resistance. The stranger circled him with exaggerated confidence before stopping behind him. "Turn around." Marcus complied without argument. The flashlight swept across his clothing, his wallet, his belt. Nothing unusual, nothing illegal. Yet the stranger continued searching as if he had already decided he would find something. "You carry yourself like you've done this before," the man muttered. Marcus answered quietly, "I've participated in many traffic stops." The stranger smirked. "I didn't ask for your life story." Marcus said nothing. Silence often exposed more than conversation. The stranger walked back toward the SUV and reached for the shoulder microphone once again. "This is Unit 7 requesting confirmation." Static answered him. Nothing else. He pressed the transmit button again. Still nothing. Marcus watched without appearing to watch. A functioning police radio rarely behaved like that. The equipment looked authentic. The procedure did not. The stranger frowned for only a moment before slipping the microphone back into place as though nothing had happened. "You've got communication problems?" Marcus asked evenly. The man immediately stiffened. "Mind your own business." "I thought this stop was my business." Their eyes met again. For the first time, uncertainty flickered beneath the stranger's confidence. Only briefly. Then it disappeared behind another layer of forced authority. Headlights approached from the opposite direction. A delivery truck slowed as it passed, its driver glancing toward the flashing emergency lights before continuing into the storm. To every passing motorist, the scene appeared routine. A police vehicle, a driver standing outside, an officer conducting an investigation. Exactly the illusion the stranger wanted. Marcus studied the SUV more carefully. The emergency lights looked convincing. The markings looked convincing. Even the spotlight mounted near the driver's mirror appeared legitimate. But appearances were easy to manufacture. Professional habits were not. "You seem awfully observant," the stranger said. Marcus offered a faint smile. "Observation is part of staying safe." The words landed harder than either man acknowledged. Rain continued falling between them. The stranger folded Marcus's driver's license once before handing it back. "I haven't decided what happens next." Marcus accepted the license without looking away. "Neither has the truth." The sentence lingered in the air. For the first time that evening, the stranger looked over his shoulder instead of at Marcus, as though he suddenly felt the need to make sure no one else was watching. He didn't realize that the moment he reached for his radio a third time, somewhere beyond the darkness, someone else had already begun listening. The truth rarely raises its voice. It simply waits for someone to make one mistake too many. The rain softened into a steady whisper, coating the highway in a silver sheen that reflected every flash of blue emergency lights. Marcus Bennett remained exactly where he had been instructed to stand. His driver's license rested inside his jacket pocket once again. His hands remained visible. His posture never suggested resistance, yet it never surrendered his dignity either. Across the shoulder, the stranger paced beside the black SUV. His movements had become noticeably less controlled. Every few seconds, He glanced toward the empty highway before reaching once more for the radio clipped to his shoulder. "This is Unit 7 requesting status." Only static answered. He adjusted the volume. Pressed the transmit button again. Nothing. Marcus watched quietly. Professional communication was built on routine. Calls were acknowledged. Identifiers were verified. Dispatchers asked questions. Silence wasn't procedure. Silence was a warning. The stranger slipped the radio back into place and looked toward Marcus with forced confidence. "Looks like dispatch is busy tonight." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That happens." The simple reply seemed to frustrate him even more. He wanted nervous questions. He wanted arguments. Instead, he was facing someone who observed rather than reacted. The stranger walked closer. "You know," he said, "most people start explaining themselves by now." Marcus answered calmly. "Only when they believe explanations will change facts." For a moment, neither man spoke. The only sound came from rain striking the hood of the pickup truck. Then Marcus noticed another detail. The badge clipped to the stranger's chest reflected the patrol lights for an instant. Its finish looked unusually bright, almost untouched. Official badges aged differently. Years of daily were left subtle scratches around the edges. Small imperfections impossible to fake convincingly. This badge looked almost manufactured. Brand new. The stranger noticed Marcus studying it. "What?" Marcus simply shook his head. "Nothing." The answer offered no confrontation. Yet somehow it carried more confidence than an accusation ever could. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance. The vehicle slowed slightly before continuing past. Its dashboard camera briefly captured the traffic stop. Neither man acknowledged it. The stranger suddenly stepped toward Marcus again. "I'm going to ask you one last time." Marcus remained silent. "Who are you?" The question lingered between them. Not "what's your name?" Not "where are you coming from?" "Who are you?" Marcus understood the difference. Some questions searched for identity. Others searched for certainty. "My driver's license answers that," Marcus replied evenly. The stranger's jaw tightened. "I don't think it does." Marcus looked directly into his eyes. "I think you're looking for a different answer." The words landed harder than expected. For the first time that evening, the stranger looked uncertain enough to hide it behind anger. He turned abruptly and walked back toward his SUV. Inside the vehicle, a rugged laptop sat mounted beside the steering wheel. Its screen glowed faintly through the rain-covered windshield. Marcus watched as the stranger began typing. Longer than necessary. Stopping. Deleting. Typing again. As though searching for information he couldn't quite access. Or perhaps information that wasn't there at all. The stranger slammed the laptop shut. A sharp sound echoed through the quiet highway. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly. He had seen enough. Without reaching for his phone or making any obvious movement, he lightly adjusted the cuff of his jacket. A movement so ordinary that no passerby would notice it. Yet hidden beneath the fabric, a tiny emergency activation switch completed its signal. Silent. Encrypted. Automatic. Miles away, inside a secure communications center, a priority notification illuminated a protected console. No sirens sounded. No alarms echoed through the room. Only one discreet message appeared across the screen. Officer safety verification request received. And before the stranger outside could realize that the balance of control had already begun to shift, the first people who truly understood what that signal meant were quietly preparing to answer it. A lie can imitate authority for a few minutes. It can never survive the arrival of the people who practice it every day. Inside the regional communications center, the atmosphere remained almost unnervingly calm. Rows of monitors glowed beneath soft overhead lighting, while dispatchers quietly coordinated emergency calls across 3 counties. Every conversation was measured. Every keystroke followed procedure. Then one small notification appeared on a secure workstation. Officer safety verification request. Dispatcher Emily Carter stopped typing. The notification wasn't loud. It didn't flash. It simply carried a security classification that very few employees were authorized to receive. Emily opened the encrypted alert. The screen displayed only a location, a timestamp, and a protected identification code. No names. No explanations. Just enough information to begin verification. She immediately reached for another console reserved for secure communications. Supervisor. A woman in her 50s walked over without haste. Communications supervisor Rebecca Lawson read the screen only once before her expression became noticeably more focused. Confirm the signal source. Emily nodded. Already authenticating. Seconds later, another indicator turned green. Verified. Rebecca quietly picked up a secure telephone that wasn't connected to the public dispatch network. Meanwhile, nearly 40 miles away, rain continued falling across the deserted highway. The stranger stood beside Marcus Bennett's truck with folded arms. His confidence had returned, at least on the surface. You've been unusually patient. Marcus looked toward the dark road stretching into the distance. Patience usually costs less than assumptions. The stranger gave a humorless laugh. You think you're clever? No. Marcus met his eyes again. I think someone eventually asks the right questions. Those words lingered longer than either man expected. The stranger looked away first. Back inside the communications center, Rebecca ended the secure call. Only 2 words escaped her lips. It's him. Emily looked up. Should I notify Highway Patrol? Rebecca considered the question for only a moment. No. Another secure line began ringing almost immediately. Rebecca answered. Lawson. She listened silently. Understood. She hung up. No emergency response. No lights. No sirens. Emily frowned slightly. Then what's the priority? Rebecca's answer was calm. Verification. Outside, the highway remained almost empty. Marcus noticed the stranger checking his watch for perhaps the 5th time. Waiting. Expecting. For what? Marcus couldn't tell. The man suddenly walked back to the SUV and opened the rear compartment. Inside sat additional equipment. Traffic cones. Reflective vests. A portable spotlight. Everything looked convincing. Everything had been carefully chosen to resemble legitimate police inventory. The stranger closed the compartment with unnecessary force. Marcus observed quietly. Real authority depended on training. Imitation depended on props. Far beyond the curve of the highway, another set of headlights appeared. Not flashing. Not speeding. Simply approaching with deliberate consistency. The stranger noticed them too. His shoulders relaxed. A confident smile slowly returned. There they are, he murmured. Marcus followed the distant lights without changing his expression. He didn't answer. Neither man yet understood exactly who was arriving. But only one of them believed those headlights would confirm the story he had been trying so carefully to perform. And somewhere beneath the steady rhythm of falling rain, the quiet balance between appearance and truth had already begun shifting toward a conclusion that no disguise could stop. The moment a performance meets the real thing, only one of them survives. The approaching headlights grew brighter with every passing second. Their beams cut through the rain without urgency, moving at a steady, deliberate pace that suggested confidence rather than haste. The stranger smiled. There it is, he said under his breath. Perfect timing. Marcus Bennett remained still. His attention never left the approaching vehicle, but his expression revealed nothing. He had learned long ago that the most valuable information often arrived before the first word was spoken. The SUV slowed. Instead of activating emergency lights, it eased onto the shoulder several yards behind the black vehicle already parked there. A second SUV appeared moments later. Then a third. None of them used sirens. None of them rushed. The stranger's confident smile faded ever so slightly. That's, he muttered. His sentence never finished. The driver's door of the lead SUV opened. A woman stepped out wearing a plain dark rain jacket instead of a patrol uniform. No dramatic gestures. No raised voice. She simply closed the door, glanced once at the highway, and walked forward with quiet purpose. 2 professionally dressed investigators followed several steps behind her. They carried no visible urgency, only certainty. The stranger immediately squared his shoulders. He adjusted his badge, straightened his jacket, prepared to greet them as though they belonged to the same organization. Marcus noticed every movement. People pretending to possess authority often spent more time displaying it than using it. The woman stopped several feet away. Her eyes moved first to Marcus, then briefly toward the stranger, then back to Marcus again. She offered a single respectful nod. Good evening. Marcus returned the nod. Evening. No introductions followed. No explanations. Yet the exchange lasted just long enough to make the stranger visibly uncomfortable. He stepped forward. I'm conducting an investigation, he announced confidently. This individual has been detained pending verification. The woman turned toward him. Her face remained composed. Has he resisted? No. Attempted to flee? No. Threatened anyone? No. Each answer seemed to reduce rather than strengthen his position. The woman acknowledged the responses with another small nod before looking toward Marcus again. You've remained cooperative? Marcus answered simply. Yes. I expected as much. The stranger blinked. You know him? The woman ignored the question. Instead, she addressed one of the investigators. Please begin documentation. Without hesitation, the investigator removed a tablet and started recording vehicle positions, license plates, and photographs of the scene. Another investigator quietly examined the black SUV. No accusations. No confrontation. Just methodical observation. The stranger shifted uneasily. Hold on, he said. Nobody has explained what's happening. The woman finally looked directly at him. We're making sure we understand exactly what happened before anyone reaches a conclusion. Rainwater rolled from the brim of her hood as she spoke. Her calmness carried more authority than the stranger's commands ever had. Marcus remained exactly where he stood. He didn't interrupt. He didn't volunteer information. He simply watched as trained professionals began noticing details that appearances alone could never hide. For the first time that night, the stranger glanced at the badge on his own chest instead of wearing it with confidence. And somewhere deep inside, he began to realize that the people now walking around the scene weren't here to support the story he had created. They were here to discover the one he could no longer control. The strongest truth is never announced. It is recognized. Rain continued to fall in steady sheets as the investigators moved with practiced precision around the roadside scene. No one raised their voice. No one reached for handcuffs. The quiet professionalism itself began to change the atmosphere. The stranger watched uneasily as one investigator examined the black SUV's emergency lighting system, while another photographed the vehicle identification number through the windshield. Every observation was documented. Every detail mattered. The woman in the rain jacket stepped toward Marcus once more. Mr. Bennett, she said evenly, for the record, have you been treated appropriately since the stop began? Marcus answered with characteristic restraint. I've remained cooperative from the beginning. Has anyone used force against you? No. Have you been informed of the legal reason for your detention? Marcus paused briefly, not in a way that clearly explained it. She nodded once. Thank you. The stranger finally interrupted. This is getting ridiculous. Who exactly are you people? The woman turned toward him. Instead of answering immediately, she removed a leather credential wallet from inside her jacket. She opened it only long enough for him to read it. His face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Confidence gave way to uncertainty. The investigator beside the SUV spoke without looking up. The emergency light controller has been modified. Another voice followed. The registration attached to this vehicle doesn't match the VIN. A third investigator added quietly. The badge engraving appears inconsistent with department specifications. Each sentence landed with the weight of a falling stone. The stranger attempted a smile. There must be some misunderstanding. No, the woman replied calmly. That's exactly what we're here to determine. Marcus remained silent. He understood that real investigations were built on evidence, not emotion. The woman looked back toward him. Officer Bennett. For the first time that evening, she addressed him by his professional title. The stranger's head snapped toward Marcus. Officer? Marcus simply met her eyes. Yes, ma'am. She gave a respectful nod. Thank you for maintaining protocol. The words echoed across the quiet highway. The stranger stared between them, confusion spreading across his face. You're a police officer? Marcus answered without pride or anger. I am. Nothing more. No speech. No dramatic reveal. Only 2 words. The silence that followed seemed louder than the storm itself. The investigators continued working as though the revelation changed nothing, because to them, it hadn't. They had already known. One investigator approached carrying a tablet. Verification complete. The woman reviewed the information before closing the screen. Officer Bennett's credentials have been confirmed through secure channels. She looked toward Marcus again. Thank you for activating the officer safety verification exactly as trained. The stranger's breathing became noticeably heavier. His eyes shifted from Marcus to the investigators, then back again. The performance he had spent the evening constructing was collapsing piece by piece. Not because anyone had accused him, because the facts no longer supported him. Marcus quietly slipped his hands into the pockets of his rain-soaked jacket. He felt no satisfaction, only relief that procedure was finally replacing pretense. The woman stepped toward the stranger one final time. Our investigation is no longer focused on Officer Bennett. She paused. It is now focused on you. For the first time since the traffic stop began, the man who had demanded answers found himself unable to give one. Justice does not celebrate when a lie collapses. It simply removes the place where the lie was standing. The highway had grown strangely quiet. Even the rain seemed softer now, as though the storm itself had stepped back to witness what happened when truth finally entered the scene. The investigators continued their work with measured discipline. Photographs were cataloged. Equipment was logged. Identification numbers were cross-checked against secure databases. No one hurried. Real investigations were never driven by emotion. They were driven by facts. The stranger stood motionless beside the black SUV. Minutes earlier, he had controlled every conversation. Now every question belonged to someone else. One investigator approached carrying a sealed evidence pouch. Inside rested the metal badge that had hung so confidently from the stranger's chest only moments before. It has been examined, the investigator said calmly. The woman accepted the pouch. The engraving is counterfeit. Another investigator looked up from the patrol vehicle. The emergency lighting system was installed without departmental authorization. A third voice followed. The registration plates belonged to a retired municipal vehicle sold at auction 2 years ago. Each statement stripped away another layer of the illusion. The stranger finally spoke. I can explain. The woman met his eyes. We're listening. For several seconds, he searched for words that never came. Every explanation required another lie. Every lie would be measured against evidence already collected. Marcus Bennett watched silently. There was no satisfaction on his face, only quiet disappointment. He had worn a badge long enough to understand that every counterfeit badge damaged the reputation of thousands of honest officers who earned theirs. The stranger looked toward Marcus. You knew? Marcus answered honestly. I suspected. You could have said something. Marcus's voice remained steady. You were never interested in hearing it. Silence settled between them once more. The investigators exchanged brief nods. Everything they needed was already documented. The woman stepped forward. For the record, Mr. Bennett never escalated this encounter. She paused before continuing. He remained cooperative despite having every professional reason to recognize irregularities. Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. Training had taught him that patience often protected more people than pride. The woman turned toward the stranger. You represented yourself as a sworn law enforcement officer. He swallowed hard. No reply came. You conducted an unauthorized traffic stop. Again, silence. You displayed counterfeit credentials while exercising authority you did not possess. His shoulders slowly collapsed. The confidence that had carried him through the night disappeared without resistance. One investigator carefully removed the remaining equipment from the SUV. Another documented each item before placing it into evidence containers. No shouting, no humiliation, only procedure. Marcus noticed passing vehicles beginning to move normally again, unaware that the dangerous deception unfolding on the roadside had quietly come to an end. The woman looked toward Marcus one final time. Officer Bennett. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for trusting the process. Marcus gave a respectful nod. The process only works when people protect it. The words lingered in the cool night air. As the counterfeit badge disappeared into an evidence bag, its polished surface reflected the flashing lights one last time before the seal closed over it. In that single quiet moment, everyone present understood the same truth. A borrowed badge can command attention. Only an earned one can carry justice. Mercy is not the absence of justice. It is what remains after justice has finished speaking. The evidence vehicles began packing their equipment with the same quiet precision that had marked every step of the investigation. Rainwater dripped from open tailgates. Evidence containers were sealed. Digital reports were synchronized before anyone left the roadside. The work was nearly finished. The noise was gone. Only the consequences remained. The counterfeit officer stood beside the shoulder of the highway with his head lowered. Hours earlier, he had spoken with certainty. Now he spoke only after gathering the courage to look toward Marcus Bennett. I didn't know who you were. Marcus regarded him calmly. After a long silence, he answered, that shouldn't have mattered. The words were not spoken with anger. They were spoken with sadness. Because they carried a truth larger than the highway where they stood. The woman leading the investigation quietly dismissed the last photographer before approaching Marcus. "Officer Bennett, transportation has been arranged if you don't wish to continue driving tonight." Marcus glanced toward his pickup truck. "I appreciate it." He paused. "But I'll drive myself." She smiled faintly. "I thought you might." Nearby, two investigators completed the final inventory of the counterfeit equipment. Every item that had been used to imitate public trust disappeared into labeled evidence cases. The false badge, the modified emergency lights, the counterfeit identification. One by one, each symbol of borrowed authority vanished from sight. Marcus watched without satisfaction. Real victory never came from seeing another person lose. It came from knowing that fewer innocent people would face the same deception tomorrow. The stranger slowly lifted his eyes again. "I made a terrible mistake." Marcus considered the sentence carefully. Then he shook his head. "No." The stranger frowned. "You made many choices." The difference settled heavily between them. Mistakes happened in moments. Choices were repeated. Again and again, until they became character. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Passing traffic resumed its normal rhythm, unaware that one of the most important conversations of the night contained almost no words at all. The woman stepped between them with quiet professionalism. "The courts will determine accountability." She looked first toward the stranger. "Our responsibility is simply to present the truth." Then she turned to Marcus. "And thank you for preserving it." Marcus nodded respectfully. "We all were someone else's trust." The investigators exchanged brief glances. No one disagreed. Because every uniform, every badge, and every promise made in public service belonged to the community long before it belonged to the individual wearing it. The rain finally began to ease. Clouds slowly separated overhead. A faint line of pale light appeared on the eastern horizon. Morning was still distant, but it was coming. Marcus walked back toward his pickup truck and rested one hand on the driver's door before looking once more across the quiet highway. Nothing about the road itself had changed. The pavement remained wet. The wind remained cold. Yet everything felt different. Not because justice had been loud, because dignity had remained quiet. As Marcus climbed into the driver's seat, the flashing emergency lights behind him reflected one final time across the rain-soaked asphalt before fading into the darkness. Some people spend their lives trying to look powerful. Others spend their lives proving that real power never needs to announce itself. A badge is made of metal. Trust is made of choices. Only one of them survives when the lights go out. The sun finally broke through the clouds just as Marcus Bennett's pickup disappeared over the distant rise. Behind him, the highway looked exactly as it had the night before. Cars passed. Rainwater dried. The shoulder emptied. To anyone driving that road the following morning, nothing seemed unusual. Yet the place had quietly become the setting of a lesson that would outlive every tire mark left on the pavement. Inside the Regional Communications Center, the final report was completed. Time of incident. Evidence collected. Verification sequence. Officer safety activation. Every line reflected the same conclusion. Procedure had done exactly what it was designed to do. Not because one person was stronger than another. Because truth had been allowed to arrive before judgment. Communications Supervisor Rebecca Lawson closed the file and looked through the window overlooking the operations floor. Around her, dispatchers continued answering calls. Accidents. Medical emergencies. Lost travelers. Life moved forward without pausing to celebrate the night's events. That, she thought, was what real public service looked like. It was rarely dramatic. It was simply dependable. Across town, Marcus parked outside the precinct just as the first shift began. A young rookie officer noticed the rain still clinging to Marcus's jacket. Long night. Marcus smiled faintly. You could say that. The rookie laughed. I hope whoever you stopped learned something. Marcus looked toward the morning sky before answering. So do I. He never mentioned counterfeit badges. He never described the investigation. He never spoke about the moment his own identity had been revealed. Because the story had never truly been about him. It had been about the responsibility carried by everyone who wore a badge honestly. Weeks later, investigators completed their case. Evidence spoke where emotions no longer needed to. Witnesses confirmed timelines. Documentation matched every observation made beside that lonely highway. Justice continued its work quietly, one verified fact at a time. Marcus returned to ordinary patrol assignments, helping stranded families, checking on elderly neighbors, directing traffic after storms. The same routine duties that rarely appeared in headlines. Because real integrity was not measured by extraordinary moments. It was measured by ordinary ones repeated every single day. Sometimes, people asked him why he remained so calm under pressure. Marcus always gave nearly the same answer. You never know who is watching. He wasn't talking about cameras or investigators. He was talking about conscience. Imagine standing beside that rain-soaked highway. One man believed authority came from a uniform that could be purchased. The other understood that authority had to be earned every morning before the badge was pinned to his chest. That was the difference. One wore metal. The other carried responsibility. And when dawn finally arrived, only one of those things still possessed any real weight. Because the law was never saved by the loudest voice. It was protected by the quiet people who refused to misuse it. He thought the badge gave him power. But before the night was over, he discovered the truth every honest officer already knew. Power may command obedience for a moment. Character is what earns trust for a lifetime.